good, healthy, sustaining diet.
Improve on or improving.
Get all the results that you want.
Welcome to the Resistance podcast. I'm Paul.
And I'm Thurston.
And today we're going to talk about a little bit of everything. I am in my 20s. I am Gen Z. This is Thurston.
GenX, 51. So we thought this would be an interesting thing to do. As Paul, you're normally behind the camera.
Absolutely.
And we always have these interesting conversations before and after our shoots. So we said, okay, well, let's do a podcast and see the difference in generations.
Let's see how little I know, I think is what we want to do. And yeah, we're going to cover a little bit of everything from Thurston's getting into health, general ideas about health, contemporary health-related developments, maybe in politics, maybe in science and whatnot. Yep. And so let's get rambling. Thurston, how did you get into health?
How did I get into health? So I went from one extreme to the other. At the time, I was working in a bar in Ireland. And if anybody knows anything about the Irish, we're famous for our ability to drink a colossal amount of alcohol.
Oh my gosh.
So I drank a lot, worked in a bar, so I was 19, 20. And I smoked. I smoked 20 cigarettes a day, Marlboro Reds, a little bit more at the weekends.
Would you say that in your circles, you were more or less fit than maybe the other guys around you or friends?
Well, at that point, I wasn't doing anything exercise-wise. In school, I played a lot of sport. I was very athletic in school.
You're a moderately, maybe like I would be.
yeah, just kind of, I was definitely not
unhealthy,
out of shape, but not necessarily in very good shape.
Yeah.
I was young, so you get away with things at 18, 19 if you were athletic.
I get it.
So, and then I joined the gym. It was a guy I knew managed it, and he was a bit of a role model of mine, actually, a bit of a mentor. So he said, come into the gym, in so many words, and I did. And everything completely changed. He put me on some crazy diet with high amounts of protein, and I was resistance training at that stage 3 times a week, much longer workouts than I do now. I mean, it seems like normal for everybody else, but 45 minutes. And I noticed a massive difference. In 6 weeks, I put on about 28 pounds.
Now, what got you over that? What got you to actually do it? I mean, people tell me, come to my gym. What actually got you there?
Well, I mean, I was athletic and into sports in school, and working in a bar and being unhealthy. I knew I didn't feel my best. But also at that stage, you're young, you're enthusiastic, you're wondering about the world. And I was always fascinated with human potential. So like, what is the potential of humans? I was into psychology, philosophy, that type of stuff too. But I thought, well, I wonder if I could just totally transform my shape. I don't know what it is, what clicked. A
lot of it was your actual curiosity.
Curiosity. Yeah, absolutely. I think at that age, I was just fascinated with like how far you could push things and with humans and human potential. Yeah, for sure.
And so at a certain point, you would have become convicted about these things. I mean, you go to the gym and then you end up a health professional. So where does that transition take place?
I mean, I was just fascinated that I really experienced something that like, wow, I can just change, what I ate. Like literally you put food in your mouth, you chew, you swallow, the usual stuff. But you just change what you put in there. You do a bit of exercise, and then you can experience this incredible transformation. So I was really captivated by it. And in a fun way in the bar, I was a bar back at the time. So the barmen would, semi-jokingly, but they'd be throwing me around because I was kind of very small and light. So they would, and then
they're
after the 6
through a
weeks,
tight corridor and they bump into you. You're the one against the wall.
Exactly. There you go. Yeah, totally that. That's exactly the way it was. So it was cool because in 6 weeks after I bulked up and everything, then I was pushing them around and
Absolutely.
it was a lot more fun. So, but it was sort of a semi-jokingly kind of thing, but it was pretty miraculous. So I was just fascinated that, wow, you just, and I felt very empowered by just this idea that, wow, I can control, like it's, in one sense, it seems so mundane. I can control like literally what food I put in my mouth.
Yeah.
Which physiologically everybody can. But I was like, wow, I remember vividly walking down the street one day and looking at everybody going, wow, like most people actually can't control what they eat.
Yeah.
And yet it's such a basic thing. But I felt very empowered. I said, well, if I can do this, I can kind of do anything. So I felt great. I definitely like shut up my self-efficacy. And I was able to like just quit smoking, just bump on one day, bang, never, and I smoked for 5 years, 20 a day. I was an addict, for cigarettes. I drank a lot and cut that down. And so obviously changed my diet. And yeah, just how I felt and walking around and being able to be stronger. And of course, for a young guy, being in shape was pretty cool.
Right.
That's definitely a motivator back then. So yeah, I think a combination of that just got me fascinated with the whole area. So then I was just very drawn to it. And then the manager of the gym, I would just be like asking him so many questions. And then eventually he sort of allowed me to help out for free in the gym. And I took that as a great like honor.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't pay me. I just helped out for free just so that I could learn stuff.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I'm sure that would be illegal, but anyway, this is a long time ago, but I was, so it was fascinating. Then I got into the field. I started studying nutrition and yeah. And the rest is history.
Right. So you go from somebody who's doing this out of curiosity, and then it becomes a thing where, I assume you're seeing people around you and you're sort of going, well, I know how easy this transition was, or not necessarily how easy it was, but what it does, So at what point do you start sort of taking the your own discoveries to other people and really wanting to start your own health business?
Yeah, I think it just sort of progressed over time. So of course I'd be saying it to my friends. In fact, funny enough, a lot of the people in the bar that I worked in, they thought I was crazy at first because 3 a.m. when we finished cleaning up the nightclub, normally it'd be the pint of Guinness. Instead, I'd be eating like beef heart and crazy things. And they're like, what are you doing? But then after a while, they saw the difference and then they got interested and some of them joined the gym and stuff. So it was just sort of a natural kind of thing that I was like, wow, like if everybody did this would be incredible. Everyone could be just operating at a much higher level in terms of their potential, their energy, just looking and feeling the way they want to.
And that's probably a huge aspect of, even in today's world, what you're dealing with, where you have this and people are looking at you like you're crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of funny how, in a way, you're doing what's totally normal and natural, but yet it seems weird because what's normal, I guess normal and natural are two different things. So what's normal is people go and eat pizza and drink beer, right?
Yeah.
But they're very highly processed things. What's natural is eating real food, but of course, real food now you have to say, well, it's a grass-fed, pasture-raised, organic steak or whatever it is. So you sound like you're this weird person doing these obscure things, which is just what we've naturally been doing for a long time. So that is kind of fascinating. But yeah, it's back then it was interesting because the numbers obviously were much smaller than today. But even then I thought, wow, there's 30-something% of people are overweight, thinking that was huge. Compared to today's statistics, that would be amazing, thinking it can't get any worse. people are obviously going to get into better shape and things are all going to improve in the future. That was my kind of naivety
This
back
must
then.
have been a long couple decades for you.
3 decades to be exact. Yeah, because now I'm 51. That was when I was whatever 20-ish, it's 2021. So yeah, 30 years ago, thinking, okay, things cannot get any worse, they were going to get better, and then it's just progressively got worse and worse and worse to where we are today.
So we talk a lot on this channel about what some of those issues are and what some of those misconceptions. If you had, a quick summary of sort of what the state of health is as you see it, what would that be?
Terrible.
Yeah.
Well, I can rattle off data and stats and bore people, but obviously the average person, okay, I'll give you one, and that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah.
93% of people are metabolically unhealthy in America, right? So 93%, only 7% are just metabolically health is normal, like when you look at blood pressure, blood sugar, waistline, the kind of 5 components, blood pressure, etc. So it's shocking. But because it's just this sort of gradual thing that's happened over the years, they call it the boiling frog, although it's not true, but it's just this gradual thing. So people aren't shocked the way they should be. If you just went bump, if you're an alien, you landed on the planet, you go, what's wrong with these people? Why are they so unhealthy? We're the unhealthiest species on the planet. I always say all these things in the podcast. So, but it is true. It's like, wow. And I feel bad, especially for the younger generation, because it's obviously progressively getting worse. And now even they talk about data and stats for children, which never used to be the case. So now 1/3 of kids are pre-diabetic.
Would you say in your 30 years, is that feel like the largest shift? The fact that we're now talking about children, or are there other shifts like that sort of...
Yeah, I do think it's a turning point, because I'm actually super excited. I've never, in the 30 years that I've been, I feel like I'm on my own shouting like, wake up, and no one seems to be listening. It's the first time that I've seen it over the last sort of 6 months that people are talking about metabolic health. People are seem to be genuinely, hey, look, we got to turn this boat around. It's all over the news. Obviously, it's in politics. Which is a pity, because it just means half are going to be pro and half are going to be against. I wish it was like nothing to do with one versus the other side. I wish we could just get together on the same page when it comes to our health, especially for our kids.
Yeah.
But I do think that when it passes over to kids, because there is this thing, and something I've shared the value, especially it's a very American value. It's like freedom, like liberty and freedom to choose. So, and I've never, despite the fact that I think everyone should be healthy and love people to experience health, I would never think we should force people into things as adults. But then when it passes over into children and kids, and they like are suffering from depression and obesity and diabetes and all these things, what kind of future are they going to have? So I think that's the line that causes change. I think that's the line that we're crossing, where we say, okay, enough is enough. We have to change this around. And if we don't change ourselves, then the future generation, it looks very bleak from a health perspective.
Well, let's while we're sort of on it, there are obviously, RFK is a figure who kind of comes in and is talking about health, and obviously we've very mixed opinions on him from around the country, but in terms of health, he's been certainly an exciting. You've been excited about the potential there to make some changes, and then what's kind of interesting is talking about what those changes would be. So we're if there's talking about freedom, we don't want to obviously force people to be healthy, but there's also aspects of the way that society and the health industry and maybe the Department of Health are shaped, where maybe you're almost being forced to be unhealthy. If it's cheaper, if it's So what are some of those things? I don't know whether it's you think about school lunches or subsidies or sort of things. What are the things that you think about where you want to see a huge change?
Yeah. Well, there's no question the big focus should be and seems to be on ultra processed foods.
Yeah.
So in a very simple way, you go back 50 years, rates of diabetes 1%. So we know we were much healthier 50 to 100 years ago, way healthier than we are today. From a metabolic health perspective, no question. You can look at all the data and stats and all that sort of stuff. So what's changed? What's changed is our food supply. Is we have way more ultra processed food. Again, 100 years ago might have been 2% of our diet, and now it's 66 to 70%.
And really briefly, when you're talking about ultra processed food, what are some of the key things you're talking about?
So ultra-processed food is highly packaged foods. So boxes of cereal, obviously candy bars, fast food, all these types of things. So when you look at the ingredient list, and it's huge, and it's all these things that you can't pronounce, you're definitely into ultra-processed food. But the main, there are all these chemicals and additives which, God knows what it does to us. And there is obviously debate about that, because in Europe there's 200-300 of them. Here there's 10,000, and so that's an obvious one. So obviously cutting back on that, because they have this thing called GRAS, GRAS, generally regarded as safe. And before the FDA would look at that and make sure that there's enough science to say it's safe. And then after a while it became so overwhelming, they said, just you tell us if it's safe or not. And that's when obviously the amount of these chemicals shot up, because no one was really looking or testing any of these things. So that's to be honest, that is an important part, but the main components of ultra processed food is a lot of sugar, a lot of highly processed grains, and industrial seed oil. So they're the three main components. Almost like, I'm rounding off, but like it's a third. So they're the components. So if you think of a donut, well, there's a lot of sugar in there, there's a lot of processed grains, and there's a lot of industrial seed oils. You mix them all together, and recipe for disaster.
Got the ultimate package.
To my worst enemies, I'll bring them donuts.
If you wish ill upon somebody, you'll bring them a box of donuts.
And I wouldn't even do that to my worst enemies. Pizza and donuts, there you go. They're the things. If I really wanted them to have a horrible day and get lots of inflammation and have terrible energy and feel awful, they're the things I would give them.
Yeah.
So, but in obviously, in all seriousness, it's even in offices. I think I've always had this, I've talked to you about this idea where it's like, if you think of it like cigarettes, because ultra-processed food is just as bad as cigarettes, if not worse.
Right.
So if you imagine in offices, it's instead of saying it's Donut Friday or Pizza Thursdays, it's Cigarette Fridays, or you had drugs everywhere. People go, what are you doing? That's crazy. But that's what they're doing. We will look back and think, this is absolutely crazy, and handing them out to kids at Halloween. And I know you're going to have to stop me, Paul. I'm going to go off on tangents here. But
that's what we're here for.
I remember, I've got a 5-year-old, and she came back from school. She was at this kind of winter school thing, and she had a certificate of achievement, and it was from a fast food place. And you get a free whatever, which obviously had highly processed oils and stuff like that, high heat, and I'm like, wow, that made my blood boil. I'm like, wow, you're at 5-year-olds, you're trying to, get them onto this ultra processed food and just do so much harm. And I'm like, how do schools allow ultra processed food things to come in and advertise to these kids? There's one thing you're asking about, things that we can do. The school system, for sure, at an early age, get rid of all ultra processed food, no advertising to kids. We got to protect the future generation. It is vital. If you care about kids, if you've got kids, there should be no debate about this stuff. Yes, there's going to be lobbyists on the other side, but any rational person out there listening to this, surely we can agree on that.
And I think about, the cigarette sort of, cigarettes are hammered into you in school, no cigarettes, don't smoke. But if they're at the same time, sort of ushering in and advertising ultra processed things, and you're here telling us that ultra processed, a donut might be worse than a cigarette, folks.
It is.
It sort of seems a little backwards.
Well,
know?
try 20 donuts a day instead of 20 cigarettes a day. There's no question it'll kill you faster. It will.
Sure.
So, yeah, ultra processed food and it's funny because, I told you about this. I always think of this really cool thing you could do because the cigarette companies literally switched to ultra processed food. They used all their techniques, both psychological and physiological. So it is interesting. So it's a great analogy. That's the way I kind of see it. I think that would be a great way to explain it and for the message to get out there. So, but going back to your question about what it is that we could do and change, I've definitely got some ideas there, but one of them for sure, the school system.
Yeah.
Japan is a brilliant place to look for inspiration because all the kids get taught about real food, cooking, all that kind of process, and they are so much healthier. I mean, I think their obesity rate's like 3%.
Yeah.
Compared to whatever, we're close to 45% here. So they clearly get much, much better results in health and longevity. And that's ingrained in kids, real food. So cooking and real food should be the order of the day.
Yeah. Well, and talking to you, that was sort of, I mean, obviously, I'm not super. I mean, I started doing video for Thurston, and over the course of listening to you and making these videos, have I slowly started to become a little more health conscious, and definitely the idea, I don't know whether you're the one who says real food or whether somebody in a book is using, but just the idea of real food is sort of important. It's sort of it's simple and it makes sense to me that we have sort of more industrial chemical thing that it's sort of food. It's like you have sort of food,
yeah,
and you have real food. So now I definitely, just because of that sort of that terminology, I think I go through a grocery store more conscious, and just day to day, I think about that. How where does that come from for you? Real food, is that like is that from something, or is that?
I mean, definitely. I mean, obviously, I follow a lot of doctors, scientists, researchers, anybody into health over the years. So I'm sure I've heard it from a number. I mean, there's so many amazing people, from Dr. Mark Hyman, Mark Sisson. I mean, there's a lot of people, in their 60s, 70s that have been doing this for decades. So I kind of know them throughout the years, because there's always people who'll jump up and be the influencer of the month type of thing. But the people who last the sort of test of time, I'm always interested in, but there's great information out there, and that there's, I think, more and more of a even a consensus in a good way, because normally consensus can be, driven by finance, etc. But there's we got to eat real food, is definitely a message. I mean, I certainly didn't come up with it, but it is something that resonates deep with me, and for decades. So, again, a little tangent, but just as you say that, what jumps into my mind, another great idea for the, whatever, if you want to call it the MAHA movement, or just really to actually things that I think would make a big difference that you could do, is I call it reverse labeling.
Yeah.
So this is I think would be amazing.
Or maybe right now we have reverse labeling.
Well, yeah, now we have. Yeah, it's the way it should be, because, again, like I was saying earlier, I mean, it's like I have to go into a restaurant or whatever and say, oh, is that, or whatever, I have to say, well, is it pasture-raised? Is it organic? Is it grass-fed? Is it grass-finished? Is it GMO-free? Is it, all of these lists of things. And I sound like a weirdo, like, can you not just eat a piece of meat? But I think if you had it in reverse, so I go there, okay, I'm just going to get whatever vegetable, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's meat, vegetable, fish, whatever the thing is, but they should have to say, well, even in a restaurant, well, we don't have a steak, but we have a chemically enhanced, an unnatural diet, GMO. Like, they should have to list off all the things that has changed from what traditionally would be healthy just like 50 to 100 years ago, what that actually should and was.
Yeah.
And if you had to hear that every time you go to eat something, people would suddenly go, what? I don't want to eat all that. I
Yeah.
don't want to have like pesticides on my vegetables and fruits. Like, I don't want all those chemicals on there. I don't want, monocropping that's going to erode the soil. So if they had to actually list all the negative things, even at a restaurant, it would be really cool. We could do a skit on this. Maybe it would be awesome. But I think that would change people's behavior very quickly.
Oh yeah.
Because I think that's one of the problems, that if you literally got something, and even an egg, because that's the problem. People think an egg is an egg. Well, obviously they're going to go for the cheapest egg. Like, why? It looks the same. It's the
Right.
same color, it's the same shape. You break it open, it makes the
And that's
same
always
omelet.
been my instinct. And I mean, even growing up, I mean, that's you've got one version of it and you've got a version of it that's 50 cents cheaper. I mean, I don't know the difference.
Yeah, of course. And why would you? How would you?
And I certainly wasn't
Yeah.
taught the difference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think if the NIH really got into this, and the FDA and the USDA, if they really got together and said, look, let's look at the science of each thing and see what impact, and if it has a negative impact, and then say, okay, we'll classify that, and that's going to be, so then you'll have all these things, and then they have to kind of clearly say, well, this is an egg, but these three things, and
You could
they're
throw in a
color
little
coded or
cancer
whatever.
risk indicator too.
Yeah, but you just kind of put all those things, and okay, this has less omega-3, this has got less this, and this has got more of these kind of toxins or whatever it is, and I think that would very much, again, what I like about these things is it educates people, because my genuine belief is nobody chooses to be unhealthy. If you really knew like how it feels to be healthy, like that you have great energy, that your mind is better, clearer, you just feel better, you less inflammation of the brain, which is really the root cause of depression. So all these things combined, if you really, I think people would choose the right thing if they could. Of course, there's a socioeconomic thing, and that is where I think the systems and structures can come into place, because the moment we subsidize things, that causes more ultra-processed foods to be cheaper. And obviously, I think we could subsidize good organic farming, great for the soil, long-term, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So,
Well, one thing that's interesting that's coming to mind is we're always talking about the sort of health of 50 to 100 years ago. Describe a little bit of the health that we sort of want to get back to, and what that looks like.
Yeah. I mean, one way that I think you can see it is that even if you go back to pictures or videos, I mean, you jump on YouTube and say, show me videos or whatever of back in the 70s, people on the beach, or look at Woodstock or whatever, and just see how much, like, everyone was in shape. Everyone was in great shape. And look, that's only a visual thing, but again, it does represent the underlying metabolic health. I mean, it just does. I mean, of course, there's a range that you can be in and still healthy. I think too much one way or the other way is obviously unhealthy, and the body is designed to kind of operate at a certain level. So it's more about obviously agility, strength, and health. Of course it is. I mean, that's what it's all about. But yeah, I mean, just even seeing those videos of back in the 70s and 80s, and how people were, obviously you can get into the data and stats and see it, like obesity and or diabetes, should I say, and just look at those rates. I think it's interesting. But so yeah, I mean, I think back then, you see, automatically you didn't have to say organic and pasture raised and grass fed, because that's just the way things were. If you go back far enough, I mean, okay, the corn stuff, I don't know when that started, in the 60s or something, but then everything just got way out of hand. It just got more and more.
One thing that you talk about that really resonates with me is the idea that the hunger system works. When you're full, but there's obviously things that are tampering with that today.
Oh yeah. That's a big thing when it comes to weight management. There's always this big debate of calories in, calories out. But I always go back to, always ask the question, why? Well, why are we suddenly eating more calories? So what is driving up the hunger? And obviously these foods are, when they're ultra processed, they're highly palatable, and they mix different flavors and tastes. It's what's called the sensory specific satiety. So if you just eat real food, again, you'll eat a certain amount of food and you'll feel full. If you eat ultra processed food, it tricks your brain into thinking that you're still hungry, and you can consume very large amounts of these things very easily. So packaged foods, I mean, you could sit there on the sofa and consume 1,000 calories without thinking. It'd be hard to chew through that amount of steak or, vegetables or fruits, real fruits, like if it's not fruit juice or whatever, you won't be able to consume that amount of real food. So the satiation index really comes into it. So again, you don't have to worry about all of these, monitoring all your calories if you just eat real food, because you're going to be way more satiated on less.
Right.
So that's always been our approach, and has works for 90% of people. And then some people you do need to kind of dial it in because their metabolic health and their insulin response and all these things may need a bit more work before they get to that. So
yeah, that's been huge for me. Also, watching what happens here is always in my mind, there's the hunger suppressant sort of approach to health, where you're just like, it's almost like a Band-Aid. You just, eat less, whatever,
Exactly. And that's so hard. I mean, oh yeah, the way you're hungry, yeah, well, just ignore that. That's essentially what people are saying, just eat less. Yeah, well, our hunger is always going to override at some point. We're always going to eat to our appetite. Yeah. So it's like the thermostat, it's like the lipostat. You just turn it down, and then you will be fuller on less. I mean, a simple thing is just eating more protein. You will feel more satiated.
Right.
It's impossible to, if all you could eat was protein, there's no way you could reach, you'd be lucky to reach 2,000 calories, never mind overeating. You'd really be pushed to do that. So yeah, so I just think, again, going back to real food, it just is more satiating, and you don't have to worry too much. So the complicated stuff is when you're trying to work with people and they are going to take a certain amount of processed foods, ultra processed foods, because then you have to come up with all these other things to counteract that. And you can look at things like CGMs and watching the blood sugar and seeing what they respond to. So it can kind of be levels of complexity depending on how far away you're going to go from what's natural.
Yeah. And it's tough, and obviously, we're talking about how it's almost harder to eat healthy than it is to not. And I have, when we're talking about some of these things, I do have a sort of reaction of like, cookies, you're gonna make Thurston, come on.
You have to eat some cookies.
Not cookies. Take that
away from you.
That's probably something that you face, whether it's with consultations or as a health professional, you're always having to talk to people about like, yeah, I understand it's hard with within the sort of mentality, with all the things that we sort of a lot of things we love, but what you talk about is there's a lot of joy you can actually find in the real stuff.
Exactly. But that's a big thing that I look at, because the psychology of this is huge, and that's health coaching and things that we really look at, because some people, they're under a lot of pressure, they're under a lot of stress in their lives, and you really have to sometimes just deal with the stress, because the added stress of having to eat healthy could be too much for some people. So I said, okay, well, can you just maybe eat a bit more protein and do the exercise, and then I'll take a more gradual approach. So the psychology behind all of these things is huge, because you are in an environment that's working against you. There's no question. Peer pressure is huge.
Yeah.
So, people go, well, I was at a party and because people don't want to do bad things on their own. They'll feel too guilty. And they're like, what? You're not having a drink? What? You're not having pizza? What? You're not and they will practically force it down your throat.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to feel bad about, well, oh no, I'm the only one, whatever. So
it's there's
a lot of peer pressure.
It's sort of a huge element that, and especially with health, now that I think about it, I see in social circles and whether it's basically just the social pressures and anxiety and shame just around eating, and then because the sort of hunger system is the way I see it is like it's thrown off because you have all the ultra processed food. You sort of have this weird thing where everybody's looking at each other like, what? Okay, you're eating that much? Should I be eating that much? Okay, you're eating that? You had two of those? I guess I can have two. It's just interesting how it's basically ultra processed food and the diets of today have sort of introduced a sort of unnatural anxiety on people just around day-to-day snacking, eating, whatever it is, social situations. I mean, that's just something I noticed in my generation, especially. And I'm surrounded by I'm a filmmaker, so actors or people who are maybe trying to be health conscious but aren't necessarily looking at it the right way, or but there's everybody wants to be healthy, everybody wants to be sort of in some sort of shape, but there's a weird sort of just cloud in the air at times about like oh, okay, all right, I guess I'll have another piece of pizza. Everyone else is, so that means it's okay.
Okay. It's funny, I don't really experience that much, but I mean, maybe I'm just not in those situations that often.
And it may be a generational thing. I don't even know, I don't know to what degree different generations handle, because obviously the health discussion has been different, with every decade and the approaches and sort of, trends and Ozempic or whatever, I don't know what the discussion was in the 90s or 80s or
yeah. I mean, sometimes it is funny because the whole Ozempic thing is like, oh, now because the whole body positivity movement, and then Ozempic came along, so it didn't matter. Anyway, people are kind of making jokes about this sort of thing in Hollywood and stuff. But I think everything is a balance, and I think everything goes from one extreme to the other. Like, because even psychologically, like if you don't, I mean, look, I don't want anyone to feel bad, and obviously I don't like shame or whatever. I think it's a misunderstanding, and I think it's the environment. And I think a lot of these things are methodically thought through to improve profits. Again, it's not some conspiracy, we're going to make people unhealthy. It's just they want to maximize profits. They want to sell as much as they can. So they will chemically enhance these things, and obviously whichever one is going to sell the most. So it's just a sort of a natural selection within that. So that is where I do think we have to sort of wake up and educate people and understand and have the right information. It is vital, because then it does trickle down into this thing where then it's affecting us psychologically, because we know we should be healthier, we know we should be eating real food, but then all of these things, the environment, psychologically, physiologically, is manipulating us into poor health.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think the answer is just embrace it and have no shame or whatever, because then everyone's going to be super unhealthy and super unhappy, because again, this inflammation that's caused by all this, so it's not just the weight, it's inflammation, and then it's inflammation of the brain, which is depression. So these things are going to affect us, and obviously poor health, and then all these health issues, and then the cost of healthcare. Whew, that's a conversation right there. Now it's close to 20% GDP, $5 trillion, because I mean they're going crazy trying to cut $1 trillion right at the moment. They're talking about that, and everyone's whatever. But I know nothing about economics, but I do know that like that's crazy. We're like, oh, we can't afford to be healthy or eat healthy, but we can spend $5 trillion in health. Like it just doesn't add up.
Yeah.
So something needs to change, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy. So then people are going to be suffering financially and bankrupt because they're unhealthy as a result from all these things. So it's just this. If you see the whole picture, the bigger picture, we just have to snap out of this. We just have to wake up out of this. Like I said, I do think that thing for our kids changes people, where they go, yeah, no, we got to do this, because whatever about adults, free choice and everything. But I don't even think free choice. I don't think, because again, would you choose, say, well, I actually want all these chemicals added to this thing, and I want this to be on it. Like, you don't want that, right?
Yeah.
So is is it free choice?
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't even, I think these things were being manipulated.
Yeah.
So I don't really see it like that. And I think we just need to be like woken up and say, whoa, hang on a second. Do you realize what these things are, what they do, how this whole system works? We need to change it.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I wasn't really influenced by anyone growing up, but I certainly didn't have like a health influence. So everything, again, at the grocery store, everything like, you've got your olive oil and then you've got the canola oil. Canola is like half the price. You got again, the cheaper eggs, the cheaper milk, whatever it is. You I had a couple health classes in high school, or nutrition classes that just don't even talk about this stuff. It's just, we talk about the food groups or whatever, but there's no, it's so easy to just fall right into the.
Yeah. And I wonder a lot, because again, with your, the younger generation, that you got a lot more pressures financially. I mean,
Oh yeah.
the cost of housing in LA, I mean, it is crazy. So, before, okay, I mean, I left school and, okay, there's 5 of us in a 2-bed place, you'd kind of cram in, but I was lucky. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. The future was so bright. Each generation did better than the previous generation.
Yeah.
And it was just, everything was so bright, optimistic. It was an amazing kind of time.
We don't have that same outlook.
Okay. Yeah. So I feel like, wow, I think we were like Gen X, probably the luckiest generation. We just had everything. It was just, everything kept getting better and better. So I do get this pressure, because then you got the financial pressure, and then so when that relates to what you're going to buy in the store and your food, well, opting for the cheaper ultra processed stuff obviously seems that's going to lend itself to that. But like I said, it's kind of a false economy that then you're going to pay,
Absolutely.
you're going to pay it back 10 times over with healthcare, and then the lack of productivity and being sick and all the other stuff. And of course, quality of life. Because I mean, I always have this kind of simplistic view. Like, what do we need? We need to be healthy and happy. I mean, surely that's what it's all about. And if all we need is like food and shelter, right? And then psychologically good, I'm big into developmental psychology, and I really think that's the future in psychology. I mean, I've got a 5-year-old, so I'm obsessed, and I'm studying and reading up all about developmental psychology. So that will allow you to grow up in the right mental environment, to be able to not have stress and depression and ADD and all these other factors as well. So there's the physiological and the psychological component. So we've got everything we need for a utopia. Like, we could have a utopia overnight. I mean, so it's all there. It's there for the taking. And I do, like I said, I've never been so positive and optimistic on the health front, that I'm seeing changes as we speak. Every day there's stuff coming out more and more that, oh yeah, we're going to change this. And even people are kind of being proactive, and before even whatever changes, hopefully good ones will happen, from the top down. Even states and schools and all sorts of places are saying, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to get rid of ultra processed food. We're going to, change these things. And there's a big awareness, and even in fast food places, they're changing to natural oils instead of ultra processed and all that. And of course, you're always going to get like, look, you're going to look up and you're going to see, oh, there's nothing wrong with seed oils. Like, you're going to find all this stuff. But here's my take on that. Look, we know we were way healthier 50 to 100 years ago. So let's not risk it, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I think anyone can agree, olive oil is probably going to be, you're not going to lose out, right, by taking olive oil instead of seed oils. And I'd also say to people, maybe have a look at the research on the brain and the effects of your absorption of DHA and stuff. Like, there's other things going on. In other words, that people are just oversimplifying these things. So if we're going to add some new weird thing into our systems, we'd want to be really sure. Like, I mean, really sure. So in other words, the onus of proof should be on introducing new chemicals or new food groups. So we should have natural should be the standard, because we know we thrived on that for hundreds of thousands of years. We can look at remote tribes and civilizations. They are like exponentially healthier than we are.
Yeah.
There's very few left, but any studies that's done on them, they're way healthier than us, all across the board, metabolic health, by just sticking to their natural diet from hundreds of thousands of years. So we know that. So let's not get too carried away and start arguing over these little things. Let's just go back to real food. And then the onus of proof should be like study after study, meta-analysis, double blind everything before we start introducing something new like seed oils, even though people are going to argue. People are going to argue, oh, seed oils are fine. I can see them already doing it. But my attitude is, well, I think even the people that are components of it say, well, I think we need some more studies. So they're going to have to convince me for a long time before I'm going to start giving that to my kid. Like that's my attitude. And I think if we start there, we're going to win. We're really going to win. So
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we are in kind of a wild space here. This is the Resistance studio using some kind of wild machines and definitely a wild program. Can you tell me a little bit about the program? Can you tell me how it addresses some of these things? We've
Yeah,
got some
so-
viewers here who might want to know.
Yeah, so these are the ultra-processed workout machines. It's funny because we spent the whole time talking about nutrition. We didn't even talk about exercise, which is
yeah.
obviously a huge component, and sleep and all these other lifestyle factors and stress. Of course, all these things play a big role. And of course, exercise, it's funny, I used to think 80-20 nutrition to exercise, but a lot of the science and research that's coming out is really saying that actually the number one thing that you can do to improve your health is exercise. And in particular, that's getting a huge, and again, this is something I've been doing for 30 years and saying, because 30 years ago, even when I was working with professional athletes, believe it or not, when I said, oh, you got to do resistance training, like lift weights, they're like, well, we're soccer players. We run around in a field. Don't be ridiculous. Like, genuinely, it was 2005, and they were like, what are you talking about?
Shouldn't we just be on a treadmill for hours
Exactly.
and hours?
Yeah, all they're running and running and running. And I said, steady state running isn't you're stopping and starting and sprinting. You need to be strong. Anyway, I had to kind of go through all the stuff. And then eventually they did, and they did amazing, won the cup, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, exercise is huge. And I've always thought like the biggest missing component, because most people when they exercise will do some form of cardio. They might start walking, which I think is probably the best actually when it comes to cardio. Running, jogging, swimming, cycling, treadmills, spinning classes, all of these different forms of cardio. But very few people do resistance training, and very few people do it properly or consistently. So that is where, I'm literally almost like jumping over to the opposite end of the scale, where I'm leaning into technology because I wanted to make it as easy as possible. Because normally when you do resistance training, you go in and it's just this big weird jungle gym. And something, I don't know if I've ever said this before on the podcast or whatever, but I actually think bodybuilding, inadvertently, of course, had such a negative impact on health in the world.
I that was one of my first impressions working with you. One of the first things that came to mind was that like this is not a place where people are like doing insane like Schwarzenegger type of that's not the feeling. It doesn't have that sort of hyper. But definitely masculine, but it's not like an intimidating sort of bulking thing. This is about health. This is about like feeling and looking your best.
Yeah, because bodybuilding was this really obscure thing that people are trying to get as big as they possibly could. Now, of course, they were taking all sorts of steroids and other things as well. But then the association of lifting weights was bodybuilding, right?
Yeah.
So and very few people want to look like that. And women certainly don't want to, well, a lot of women didn't want to bulk up for a long time. And men just wanted to be kind of lean and athletic. And anyway, everyone had different wants and needs, and that
Yeah.
changes, of course, over time with trends and stuff like that. But yeah, bodybuilding was so weird and obscure. And then people just associated that with lifting weights.
Yeah.
And of course, they thought it would happen overnight. And anybody that wants to gain a bit of muscle knows it's not that easy.
Yeah.
Wow, if only. So, but I think inadvertently bodybuilding literally set us back decades because actually, and now finally, I think the tide is turning where people are understanding, wow, even for longevity, especially as people get older, and the longevity thing, everyone's, because from the age of 50, you lose 1% of your muscle, 3% of your strength, 6-7% of your power. So, and that's really what caused the decline in our quality of life into our 70s. And if you get a fall, 30% of people die within a year. And anyway, I won't bore you with all the data and stats, but essentially the type of muscle that we lose, aging is primarily sarcopenia, the loss of muscle. So the type of muscle that we lose is the type 2, the strength muscle, not the, so you can do all the aerobics in the world. You're not going to lose that muscle anyway. That's why people in their 80s can hike for hours, but they're not strong or fast.
Right.
So that is the single most effective thing that people can do for their health, for their blood sugar, because again, the muscle is what uses up the blood sugar, turns it into energy. So if you have less muscle, then your blood sugar spikes will be higher and then you end up with diabetes. So all of these things, and when you're younger, you want to get as strong as you possibly can. And that's what the research shows. Even if you're strong when you're younger, into your 70s, that will stand to you. And your quality of life, of course, and your shape and everything else, and the psychology and all these things. I mean, 2 bouts of 25 minutes of resistance training a week is better than antidepressants in some studies. So, well, obviously what we've done is we've leaned into the technology. So you don't have to these cumbersome weights. You just get on and go. And if you're stronger, you can, more weight is then applied. It's, I'm not going to do a sales pitch, but this is next level. This is the future of resistance training. This is really awesome and allows people to come in. We've got a mix of clients, some who are super strong, athletic, young. We've got people in their 70s that are just looking for mobility. And it's great. We can just put everybody in the same class doing the same exercise and it's going to respond perfectly. So it just makes it so much more approachable, so much easier, less complicated. Less than 20 minutes. It's amazing.
Another like sort of mental thing with it is that you're right. If you had somebody who looked like they were bulking next to somebody who didn't, who maybe is at the beginning of a fitness journey, in here you don't see the bulking person with 400 pounds on a bar and this person with 80 pounds on a bar. You see 2 people lifting straps that are, as far as you can tell, exactly the same, and they're both putting 100% into it. And that's sort of a thing about gyms that is intimidating. I mean, not only are you dealing with all the cumbersome elements and setting weights and so forth, but you're also dealing with all these people around you who are like, oh my gosh, how do I get there? How do I almost want to ask them for help, but because I know I need it, but I don't want to. That's embarrassing. And are they, do they have a trainer? Are they studying on some sort of program? Like, how does this work? And I mean, I know so many people who told me one day they were going to the gym, come back. That was the only time they went. Because it's just like, what do you can't figure it out. And I've filmed and watched people do this enough to just see that it's like you just get right in the role with it, and it's not intimidating like that. And that's kind of important because with all these things, whether it's national health crisis, getting back to where we were 50, 10 years, 100 years ago, it is a tied up maze kind of mess, and you need solutions that are, simple and practical. And that makes sense. And that, whether it's the real food or the reverse labeling or the, the 20-minute workout here, it's like all these things to me are just sort of, they click, and, these are the sort of things you need to wake people up.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big believer in technology applied in the right way.
Yeah.
Because I think that's another big thing that I think has let us down as a society, because I think there was huge optimism with Silicon Valley and tech, and it was going to change the world. And then we got all these devices that just made us more depressed, and all the data and stats for screen time and social media and all these things is detrimental to teenagers and their self-worth and the pressures and the stresses of having to look like everyone on Instagram and all these things. It's awful. It's terrible. I'm blessed because I literally grew up in the last decade without the internet back in the 80s. I feel like that's the golden age because we lived in the real world. I mean, we had to go out in the parks and I remember being out in my garden at home. All I had to play with was my imagination, climbing trees and stuff. And now it seems like almost a utopia, like comparison.
When I'm switching phones ever, I'm getting a new phone or whatever, or my old phone died or whatever. When I'm in that like 30 minute to 2 hour window where I'm phoneless, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with myself. It's like, wait, I can't, I'm not in touch with anyone.
Yeah. And there's so much research that boredom is so important. Because before you'd sit in a waiting room and you just look at the walls,
Right.
Like you literally had to sit there for an hour.
Doctor's office as a child.
Yeah, all these things. You would just literally have to sit there, Now we can't go for 2 minutes without distractions, and it's awful. So but I do think there's a place for technology that can actually, like, I see these trends and things, like I think in the right way, AR, funnily enough, can take us away from screens and literally augment reality. So
Right.
It brings you back to reality. So I would still be there with you. But then if we said, hey, whatever, and we could both look in the thing with overlay, but it's only there when we need it, and then it's out of there, and it wouldn't. At the moment, it's walking into lampposts and people crashing cars. It's terrible. It's just distraction, and we can't sit still for a moment. So, but I think like anything, it's brand new. We're all excited, and we're into the technology rather than what it can actually do for us or not do for us. So hopefully we'll learn that, and all the data and stats that's coming out on the effects on kids. I think people are starting to take note, and hopefully again the NIH and the HHS and stuff will look at all this as well and incorporate this into recommendations and education and stuff on this, because wow, that's another area that I feel really bad for your generation and younger generations, because it's wow, I couldn't even imagine it. I really can't. It's scary to me. So I feel blessed with my upbringing, like literally climbing trees, and you just use your imagination, and our levels of focus and concentration would be so much better. I mean, I'm fascinated. People can't focus for more than 5 minutes. I mean, it's crazy, really, really crazy. So, but yeah, I'm fascinated with technology in the positive sense and how we can use this to make things easier and better and give us good feedback. So I am kind of tech forward, but with that asterisk where I don't want it to be distracting and go off on tangents. So I think that there's a balance there as well to be had.
Well, this has been a pleasure. I thought that maybe wrapping up this time, it might be fun to, since we're all trying to get healthier, especially if we've been watching for this long, let's have a book recommendation from Thurston.
Book recommendation, sure, yeah. There's so many good books. I don't know whether you just want to. The one that I happen to be reading now,
you're gonna have to save them for next time. Whatever's on your mind, whatever's first. Only one book. You get one.
Okay, well, if I only get one...
next time you get another.
Okay. I'm always going to be biased towards the one I'm reading now, but the one that I think, if I had to just recommend one book to people just for all-round health, I'd probably recommend Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia.
Yeah.
I think it's a brilliant jump forward in the right direction, because he's a really good doctor, medical doctor. So he talks about everything from medications to testing, but obviously exercise, nutrition. And what I love about him is that he's great at putting things in perspective. So he'll say, well, yeah, look, I mean, you got to look at your all these markers and stuff like that. And, if you can take drugs that help with hypertension and blood sugar, that will help your overall mortality 20-30%, but exercise being in the top quartile compared to the bottom quartile of strength is a 250% difference in overall mortality. So he's great at giving really good sort of context. And his number one recommendation is exercise, both for fitness, VO2 max, and strength. And he probably puts them at kind of equal. And then he obviously thinks nutrition plays a role and protein. So, but he gives you a very good all-round kind of sense of health, and obviously longevity is what he's kind of known for. So that's going to be my number one recommendation.
All right. So, well, whatever you're reading right now, drop it, because you got to read Outlive by Peter Attia. Sounds like I've got to also. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Paul. Yeah, and, for sure.
I think we'll see you next time.
Yeah, and if there's anything else that people want to hear, especially generational stuff, I think it is kind of interesting. We've got Gen Z and GenX. So I think that's kind of a fun thing, because I like to kind of understand more about the younger generation, what they're thinking and what their challenges are too.
Yeah. Until next time.
See you soon.